What I feel like we get so caught up in culture is we are wanting the story. We're wanting the love story. We're wanting, like, when is it going to start? When is it my turn? When is it going to start? And the shift for me and what I talk about clients is like us as like human beings, like our ultimate love story is the love story of what God is doing in our lives. If you think about like a chapter book, like if you think about like a storybook, like the story starts. You didn't enter the picture until chapter 4, 7, 10, 25. Like you didn't enter in, like the story's been going on. Welcome to the Grace for the Growth podcast. I'm your host, Courtney Leo. The goal of this podcast is to encourage you on your own growth journey by empowering you to live your life with authenticity, freedom, and confidence. We will get real and raw as we dive into honest conversations about life, faith, business, relationships, dating, healing, and so much more. My goal is that you would walk away from our time together feeling a little less alone, a little less crazy, and a little more brave to be yourself. I hope you will find yourself more compassionate to past you, challenged as present you, and excited for future you. Embrace the story, welcome the messy of it all, sit in the unknown, and most importantly, live authentically. So pull up a chair in my virtual living room and let's dive into today's conversation. Hey friends, welcome to this episode of Grace for the Growth. I'm so excited about today's episode. I am bringing Nick, my fiance, back for today's episode. We are starting today's series kind of sharing about our story and our journey. And today's episode, we talk about our singleness journey. We talk about the biggest lessons that we learned along the way. We ask each other some questions about that and really just kind of what are some of those foundational truths that we had to learn and we had to grow in before we even met. I always say that our love stories begin even before we meet our person, and this episode proves that. So if you're not already doing so, I want to encourage you to watch us on YouTube. You get to kind of see us interact a little bit. There might be some surprises along the way in this series, but want to encourage you to go to YouTube, and if you would do us a favor and subscribe and like and comment. That's really cringy, I understand, but it really does help us expand our reach and be able to reach more people as we continue to share this message of grace for their growth and help people feel a little less alone and a little more seen in whatever situation they're navigating. So if you would go ahead and do that, that would be awesome. The other thing I'll say is in this series that Nick and I are sharing our stories and God's truth in our lives along the way, we will want to be answering some of your questions. So if you'll go on YouTube and in the comment section, as you're watching, as you're participating, go ahead and drop some takeaways or some questions that you have for us that we can answer on future episodes. If we get enough questions, we might do a Q&A episode. So that's just that. So if you would go ahead and do that, that would be awesome. I'm really excited for you to tune in to today and to hear a little bit more about that journey. We talk about what does it look like to navigate loneliness in that singleness season? How do you get out of it? What does it look like to get in a place of contentment with your singleness? It's not at a place of bitterness, but into a place of love. What are the truths that we had to learn along the way that really kind of lays this foundation for the day that we meet? So anyways, I hope you'll enjoy today's episode. I'm so excited to bring Nick back. We're no longer long distance, and so we get to record a little bit, and I'm just really excited to hear your thoughts, hear your takeaways, and share this part of our journey with you. So without further ado, let's start today's episode. Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of Grace for the Growth. If you're watching on YouTube, you already know Nick is here today.
Woo!
Woo woo! As we start our series about what we're learning along this journey, because everyone always asks us questions all the time. Everyone, my DMs are full of questions.
Not me.
My question.
Nobody asks me one question.
They're asking you vicariously through me.
Well, I would like a question.
Well, we are going to answer some questions. But we are starting a series today and this month and probably next month. And if you keep asking questions, maybe we'll keep going. But just sharing about some things we've learned along the way, some lessons we've learned along the way. Grace for the Growth, we're all about feeling a little less alone and a little more seen. So,
When you say along the way, what do you mean?
lessons along the way, like we're still on the journey.
Like our life, the way, us, the way.
I mean,
all of the above, the way.
I don't know what you mean.
Well, you're saying along the way, so along the way of our life.
Yeah.
Okay.
Along the way of life.
Yes.
Along the way of life. So, we're gonna attempt to do this in segments, but really, we just want to do something longer than an Instagram story. Because we can't really tell stories that way, and people want to hear stories. So, today, we are talking about the pregame.
The pregame.
We're talking about life leading up to the day we met. How did we meet? Did we meet on apps? Did we meet walking into a grocery store? Are you an Amazon delivery driver that dropped off a package at my front door? What happened? What is the story? And what got us to that day? We'll see kind of how the direction of the conversation takes us. And then make sure that you are subscribing to either podcast platforms or subscribing to YouTube, because we've got...
Or both.
Both would be actually wonderful, because we are going to talk more. We're going to talk about long distance dating. We're going to talk about how did you know? When did you know? What did that look like? We're going to tell our engagement story, which I've never told publicly before. So that'll be fun. You'll be here to tell it too. I
had a small role.
A small role in the engagement story. And then, surprise alert, I moved. So we're no longer long distance. It's a big change. So we're navigating stuff along the way. And by the time we get there, who knows what else we have to talk about. So
life just be lifing.
Yeah, life just be lifing. All the things that you're learning as two people who individually wasn't 100% sure if I was getting married ever. I kind of given up on it for a little bit, to be honest. What about you?
Until we say I do, I still don't know. Could be a dream.
He's like, there's always a chance. There's always a chance.
Have you ever had that dream where you're in like math class and then you wake up and you're like, I'm 30? Like,
wait, I actually had that last night.
Oh gosh.
I literally had a dream I was in school last night.
So you just don't know. You don't know if this is a dream. It feels like a fairy tale.
A fairy tale. It feels like a fairy tale. Okay, well, we've just been talking around for a little bit. Let's get into it. I've got some questions for you. Okay. I'm sure you have some questions for me. Maybe. We're going to tell stories and get into it. So give us a little insight. So you've been on the podcast before. Our friend Lauren Matthews, my friend Lauren Matthews, now our friend Lauren Matthews, interviewed you. Mm-hmm. And we need to throw this out here. I threw this out on last episode, but that podcast episode released on our engagement day, and we did not coordinate that.
Well, we didn't.
We did not coordinate that. I planned my podcast schedule far in advance. You planned our engagement day even further in advance.
Yep.
And they coincidentally happened to be the same day.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a sidebar. That's a tangent there. But all that being said, Lauren interviewed you. We got to hear a little bit about kind of your thoughts. I think you gave you had a really good conversation around redefining masculinity and what does that look like and partnership. And so you shared a little bit about your story there. But I'm curious if we can go back to talking about if we look at Nick's life prior to meeting Courtney. Yes, annoying talking in third person. But if we talk about Nick's life prior to meeting Courtney, what did dating look like? Where was your head at? Where was your mindset at? What did singleness look like for you? Love it? Hate it? Thriving? Were you cool with God about it? Did you hate it? Okay, was that enough questions? Give us the 411.
It would depend on the era at which you're talking about in my life. Because I felt good emotions about being single. I've felt bad emotions about being single.
Sure.
I've felt trepidation about trying to not be single.
Sure.
I mean, I've got a plethora of things, of emotions, as most people do, dealing with this subject. But I mean, probably a year before we met or so, I about a year before we met, I had reached a point of being great single. I again, ups and downs, obviously, but I had reached a point where I was happy with my spiritual life. I was happy with my emotional life, and I was making decisions about my life to better myself first, and to do things as if I would never not be single.
Sure.
And it wasn't in an effort to, well, if I check all these boxes, I won't be single, or if I check all these boxes, this will work out. Like, it was nothing like that. It was just trying to better myself as a human being.
Yeah. So it wasn't like this, if I do these things, then I feel like I will arrive to be like deserving of marriage, or like complete level singleness. Like,
no, not at all. Because I mean, there were times in my life where I had that thought. I was like, well, I have to reach this point before God lets me find the one, or something like that. And none of this was an effort to accomplish that.
Sure.
It was just me. I reached a point in my personal life to where I decided I want to be the best human being I can be.
Yeah.
I want to love people. I want to care for people. I want to be there for people. I want to be there for myself.
Yeah.
I want to be there for my family, things like that. And so it was just it turned into a self-reflective journey.
Yeah.
Of, this is who I want to be.
Yeah.
I want to be a good person.
Sure.
And at some point, I even resolved to not even care about relationships.
So obviously I know the answer to this question, but so you're single, you're in your 30s, you're in your early 30s. So you're single. Tell us about, like, just that 5,000, 10,000 foot view. Like, did you date a ton? Did you have a lot of dating experience? Like, what did your history kind of with your singleness versus dating look like prior to us meeting?
I had very little dating experience. I had a semi serious to serious relationship several years ago, and it did not end well emotionally for me. And so from that point until we met was probably 5 years or so, give or take. I don't know for sure. But and a lot of people are like, oh my gosh, that's a really long time. It is, but the emotional impact of it was lasting of like 3 years after her and I broke up.
Sure.
And I say that to say it stuck with me.
Yeah.
And so I hadn't like wanted to date past that anymore, just because of the emotional, I hate to say trauma, just because it feels very heavy to say that, but the emotional weight of what I felt.
Sure.
And so, like I didn't date a whole lot, and I never really dated much in high school. I never dated much in college. One serious relationship while I was in college, and that's pretty much it. And it's not that any one person did anything just so significant that it just traumatized me. It was just I've kind of been this person most of my adult life, I should say, where I try to learn from my mistakes, but also try to learn from those around me, their mistakes. And I was just like, you know what? This didn't work out. So how about I take a step back and I'm just going to do me. Like, and it wasn't I'm going to build myself up and I'm going to make myself the best I can be. Not at that time.
Sure.
Then it was just, I'm just going to live my life. I'm going to have fun. And just be Nick.
Yeah.
And that's all it was. And I mean, there was also like, there was a hindrance of just self-image. I mean, I wasn't confident as a person, just in the way that I looked or the way that I felt that I looked, whether it was an accurate representation or not. I mean, I had people tell me all the time, like, Nick, you're a good looking guy. You're fine. you should have more confidence. And my brother used to get on to me. He's like, you're never going to find anybody if you don't put yourself out there. And I was just like, I'm good. Like, I'm just living life.
Yeah.
I'm fine.
Yeah.
So it's never been, like, oh, I need to do this because of.
Sure.
So even then it wasn't to build myself up. It was more recent that I was like, I just want to be a good human being.
Yeah.
And then I started on a weight loss journey, and that was probably 10 months before we met or so. And through that, I gained confidence.
Yeah.
I did. I came out of my shell a little bit, and I realized that one of my personal hindrances was my self-image and my weight. And I was a larger guy, and I started losing weight and being more active and getting in the gym and just doing different things. And for me, it helped just make me more myself. It didn't make me a better person by any means. That was not at any point in like jeopardy. It wasn't like, oh my gosh, now I'm skinny, I'm a good guy. Like, no, it was just, now I'm confident enough to smile at someone, or to text someone, or to even ask a friend, hey, do you have any friends that are single? Like, it was just a confidence thing.
Yeah.
And so that I say that to say that if someone has some sort of like body dysmorphia, whether it's for being skinny or being big, don't let that hold you back.
Yeah.
I know it's a thing. Yeah. I know it's real. Yeah. I experienced it. I still do. I mean, you tell me all the time, like, I'll see a picture of myself and I'm like, that's me. And you're like, I'm trying to tell you.
It's true. It's true.
And so, I mean, it's very much so, like, it was just a confidence thing. And so, me losing weight doesn't make me a better person. It just helped me to feel more myself.
Yeah.
Which made me more confident.
Yeah.
So it's all about feeling confident in who you are.
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Feeling like you can be yourself, like feeling like you can show up in the world, and how there's so many different ways that we get there. Yeah. And for you, that was a part of your journey. For you, that was a part of that journey for you to get there, to that authenticity piece. I know we'll get into a second of how we met and how we were introduced, but before we get there, take us into the seasons, the months leading up to the time that we met. What's your mindset around dating, and or singleness, or finding your person? To set the scene there before we meet. Set the scene for where is Nick last year, before we meet.
I would say probably 3 months or so before we met, I was actually not in a great place mentally, as far as dating goes and things like that. It wasn't that I was, it wasn't centered on dating. It was just centered on loneliness.
Yeah.
Which dating is a byproduct of not being lonely or contributing to loneliness if you aren't having it. You know what I mean? It was just a byproduct of that. And so I struggled. There was a very low point. I remember just honestly laying in bed crying, praying, like, Lord, I don't know what to do. I feel anguish because I feel so alone. I feel like so many people around me have someone to just talk to just be with, to listen to them. I remember, and this is a downfall of like TikTok, if you start watching these videos or whatever, it starts your algorithm on the dark path. I have an entire section of TikTok saved of like crying. And it's like, if I want to be emotional, I just go to that playlist and I watch all of my crying videos. And yeah, I had it. But there was one in particular that it was like, didn't text anybody for 36 hours, wanted to see who texted me first.
Yeah.
Because I always felt like I was the one showing up.
Yeah.
No one texted me. None of my friends texted me. None of my family texted me. Obviously, I wasn't in a relationship, so she didn't text me.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking, like, it just was a dark moment of loneliness. And I was like, wow, does anyone care if I'm still here or if I continue to exist realistically? And I had one friend that began noticing that I was going home every day after work and not being social and stuff. And she was like, no, we're going to hang out. Let's go eat food and let's go do this. And she really helped to pull me out of that without knowing it.
Yeah.
Just in the fact of she gave me, she gave me the semblance of someone that cared.
Yeah.
And I truly felt like she cared. And it helped.
Yeah.
And so that's, I mean, it helped me to begin thinking, okay, all I should really do is care.
Sure.
And all I should do and want to do is show up for someone or be there for someone.
Yeah.
And that then led to, okay, if that's what I need, then I'm sure there are others that need it.
Yeah.
And if there are others that need it, you know, at some point, maybe I meet someone that can meet me there.
Yeah.
With needing to be there for people and to show up for
Sure.
people. So it inadvertently was a big roundabout way of going from loneliness and depression to, oh, now I'm actually getting ready to be able to move towards relationship.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Well, I think what you described is not an isolated experience. Isolated, but it's like not an isolated experience just to you. Like, we have a lot of people watching who are also experiencing singleness, and that whole aspect of feeling like I remember also feeling the same, of just being like, I have not experienced human connection in a long time, like, you know, in so many hours. Like, this feels unnatural, like this feels, you know, weird, like, and all that kind of thing. And it's something that so many singles experience every single day, probably experiencing right now, like, of just that sense of loneliness. So I don't know, we've got other stuff to talk about, but before we move on, I just want to take a pause here. And if there's anybody listening who's experiencing that drought of connection, feeling that loneliness, what would you say to that person today?
My initial thought to that question, what would I say to the person experiencing that drought of loneliness? And just my initial thought is, it probably isn't the perception you feel it is. Not saying you're not lonely. I'm not saying that you don't have these feelings. What I am saying is that most people are so wrapped up in what's going on in their own lives, they don't even realize that you haven't spoken to so-and-so, or you haven't engaged with this subject or this person.
Sure.
And so a good way to begin, I think, for me, it was literally I started walking. Like, I live on a very straight road. And I was in a weight loss journey. So, I mean, that made a difference. But I remember, and this friend of mine that helped me, she would know whenever I was like, she could tell. She'd be like, Nick, are you okay? Like, what's going on? And I would just be like, no, I'm fine. It's fine. I'm going to go for a walk. So I started, I mean, there'd be times, it'd be 11 p.m., pitch black outside. I live in the middle of nowhere. And I'm walking down the street hoping I don't get hit by a car, because I knew if I just sat in my house and brooded in my environment, then it wasn't going to get any better.
Sure.
I had to make an effort. I had to start doing something different. I had to break up the monotony. And I had to break up the normal.
Yeah.
You know, and I put up quotation marks, because it becomes your normal to be depressed, or it becomes your normal to be alone and to be lonely.
Sure.
And I found that even in my, like, I walked alone a lot of times. Sometimes my friend would say, hey, come to my neighborhood and walk. But most of the time I walked alone. But I found myself walking through the countryside down this long, straight road, building up stamina and just bettering myself physically. I started praying. And I started seeking God and just talking to God, or I would listen to a podcast. So it felt, it's not human interaction, but it started feeling like, oh, and I'm the weirdo that, like, they're talking in a podcast, I'm talking to them. I'm like, here we go. Like, no, let's hear what you got to say. You know what I mean? And so I began getting faux interactions, if you will.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, I mean, that's not like a long-term help, but it began showing me a little bit of the light in the darkness.
Yeah.
It was just that semblance of there is hope.
Yeah.
People are in the world. I may have to talk to the people or go to the people or whatever, or just express to someone, hey, I'm really struggling.
Yeah.
Because I had a friend that she reached out and she was like, hey, are you doing okay? And I'd just be on. And this is something that stuck with me. Stop saying, oh, I'm good, or everything's fine, or yeah. If someone asks you how you're doing, and if they're a genuine friend or a person you can trust, be honest with them.
Yeah.
Hey, how are you doing? Honestly, I'm having a hard day.
Yeah.
We don't have to talk about it. I'm not putting it on you that I'm having a hard day. You don't have to fix my hard day, but I have to be honest and say, hey, I'm having a hard day.
Yeah.
So thank you for asking me how I'm doing. I think that goes a long way.
Yeah. It's a really helpful skill in a relationship too.
Yeah, that's true.
That has served us well by being honest and not just being like, yeah, everything's fine. Like being able to name our feelings and communicate about that. Like that started for both of us in singleness and has helped us in our relationship.
Or when someone, and this is just a tangent really fast, when someone does something that you're like, that wasn't okay, instead of being like, I'm so sorry. Oh, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not okay.
Yeah.
But I accept your apology.
Yeah.
You know, it's that same premise.
Yeah.
Like we're honest. We are able to address the issue and move on. And hopefully we surround ourselves with people that, whether they have the answers or not, will at least sit with you.
Yeah. Because
I think that's like 75% of the battle.
Yeah.
It's just a person to sit and to be with you and to love you. I think it's so important. And people don't realize the impact of a presence.
Yeah.
It's good. Yeah. It's just for believers, for Christians, we talk about the presence of the Lord.
Yeah.
For me personally, I truly believe and feel like the comforting presence of the Lord. It's not God telling me everything's going to be okay.
Right.
You're going to be fine.
You're right.
Like, no, you sit there and you're weeping before God and you just feel a comfort. And it's just a feeling of you're not alone in this.
Yeah.
You're able to make it through. And when people are dealing with grief and sorrow, you're able to just exist. Mm. And that presence, it's such a huge part of recovery and enlightenment and just, I'm going to crawl out of this hole. Yeah. I've got help. Somebody's holding their hand out to me.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But get moving.
Yeah. You can't not move.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of times I've done it with family members where I'm like, all right, we need to, you've got this addiction, you've got this addiction. Here's some avenues at which we can do. And they're like, okay. And then you go back later and you're like, okay, you still haven't done anything.
Sure.
Or you haven't changed this aspect. You're still depressed because of, and I know it's hard, but let's just get up and walk outside.
Yeah.
Let's do something easy.
Yeah.
And you at some point you do have to get up for yourself and say, please just help me up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I'm a really big extrovert. And so don't think that'll come surprise to anybody who's known me for 2 seconds, but I have to do something like get out of the slump, like in the loneliness seasons that I've felt was solo dates. Like, how can I show myself intentionality, like plan like the pizzazz and the joy and the excitement and be intentional around that. That's why I love talking about solo dates. I tell people all the time, like, I feel like solo dates changed the game for me. Yeah. I started doing solo dates. I got tricked into them by going to Disney World. That's a whole story here, but like, been doing solo dates for the last 8 years and I still do them. I still practice them, and being able to go, okay, how can I show myself kindness and care? And in my singleness, it was very much of kindness and care, and I need to be around other humans and really reaching out for that. So I think that like moving the needle forward in your singleness and in your loneliness to be like, I really wish something was different, but there's a lot of things I can't control, but what can I control today? I think is a really important piece.
Yeah. And you've even mentioned to me, and it doesn't, I love the idea of solo dates, but for some that's a really lofty, it's a very high aspiration. Like, I'm going to go to a restaurant or a movie by myself.
Going to a theme park is not joyful for everyone.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to go do this by myself. It could even start as I'm gonna go sit on the front porch
Yeah, for real.
in the sun, or just hear the birds chirp, or smell the breeze, or
go for
feel
a
the breeze,
walk.
or go for a walk. It can be extravagant. You can go to the Christmas parade, which you used to do.
Yeah.
You could go to a theme park, or you can just go enjoy something that it speaks to you, or it feels comfortable to you.
Yeah.
And it's about, when we're trying to work through feeling confident and building our confidence and building our, I can't think of the opposite word of depression, but building out of our depression.
Sure.
Do something that is comforting and gives you that, oh no, I want to do that again.
Yeah.
And I found that in just literally walking out of my front door and walking down my driveway and walking down the street. It was cheap. It was easy. And I could do it every day. I remember putting on a rain jacket and I'm just walking down the road and people were like, what are you, like, I'd call my brother and he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm raining. He's like, isn't it storming? I'm like, nah, it's fine. I just want to walk. So, it's just, it can be easy or it can be extravagant.
Yeah, for sure.
There are many different variations. So please don't let the lights and the theme parks and all that scare you.
Sure. That's the me version of it.
That's you. That's not, I'm an introvert. I don't necessarily care to be around a bunch of people.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's okay to find your version.
Absolutely. So good. So you're in this place of just moving, just doing something different, just moving in all different areas. You've worked through some really dark times, some really low lows, and you meet this crazy girl who's been on her own journey of singleness. And there's a lot about last year before we met that felt like I went on this like highs and lows of roller coaster. I know we just talked about theme parks, but this highs and lows of roller coaster, like this feeling that so first of all, I'll give you like a quick recap in case you haven't caught up on episodes, but like I was, grew up in the height of purity culture. I was afraid to date. I felt very, very clearly the Lord tell me that I was afraid to date. I didn't date. I didn't go on a first date for 8 or 9 years. Like it's a whole thing. Like I didn't, some of it was my own fault. Some of it was just stage of life, but a lot of it was, dating was like such a big deal and it was so intense. And I felt so, honestly, I was afraid of it. Like it wasn't that I, didn't want it. Like I wanted it. I wanted to be in a relationship, but I was afraid of the process. I was led to believe, to fear so many things. And I didn't know how I could go on a first date without knowing, is this person marriage worthy before I go on a first date? And I was led to believe that that was a waste of my time. And so I really had to work a lot about 5 years ago now, over my mindsets around dating. And then I was in a relationship about 3 years ago, a little over 3 years ago now. And it was like my first adult relationship, like non-college, not whatever. And I learned a lot and I got extremely bamboozled. It was extremely harmful and painful and triggering and all the things, more stories for another day. But I remember leaving that relationship and being so confused, and that was part of it because my body was just trying to survive what happened, but also being like hopeful because I was like, okay, it has to be better than this. I feel like I was bamboozled in that relationship and like it has to be better for this. And so after some therapy and after some healing, I started dating ish. I started doing like more like Zoom dating, like long distance dating. And God told me that I was hiding behind a Zoom screen and that I actually needed to online date. I needed to get on dating apps. I needed to go on dates in person in my city. And I was freaked out about it, but I did it. And it was hard. It was so much time. It was so much energy. I wasn't running a business. I wasn't building it. Like my focus was on my dating life. And I learned so much about not just myself, but I also learned about my future person. And through all these dates and what felt great and what didn't feel great and what I wanted and what I didn't want and how to communicate and how to connect. And all the nerves about dating just went away, and had a lot of lessons along the way. And then after like that was like about a period of 6 months, and then I just kind of slowed down for a little bit, and there was a couple dates here and there. But then at the beginning of 2023, before we met, I went on a couple of dates with somebody, and he was somebody who made me feel more hopeful and more optimistic about marriage, like up until that point. And because, if you've been on dating apps for 0.2 seconds, it's really easy to lose your optimism, right? Like, it's real. It's real. And my mindset was always, I can't be so pessimistic about this, because there has to be good people on dating apps, because I'm on dating apps, and I'm a good person. Like, I'm a diamond in the rough. So if I'm here, someone else has got to be here, right? Like, someone else has got to be somewhere. And that was kind of my mindset. And I went on a couple of dates with this person who made me remember that there are good people on dating apps. And it ended so confusingly. He basically gave me a bunch of excuses, ghosted me. It was so crazy, and it ended up being extremely triggering for my last relationship, triggering a lot of things from my last relationship. And so I remember being in therapy, talking to my therapist, and then talking to one of my other coaches, and I'm sitting there and I'm like trying to be back on apps, and like, let's do this again, and like, here we go, and rah rah. And I remember my therapist going, okay, so let's talk about the emotion of anger, because my attitude was terrible. My attitude about dating, period, was terrible. I was over it. I'm like, here I am, and I like coach people about singleness and dating and all this kind of stuff. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, I hate everything. Like, I don't like this. I'm mad at everything. And my therapist is like, we need to have some anger we need to feel. And until we feel that, and until we name that, until we work through it, dating is going to suck. And I was like, okay, you're right. And so I went off of dating apps. I didn't go on a first date. I was not dating when we met. Like, I was not actively dating. Sure. Was I open to something happening? Obviously. I wasn't like shut down and closed off and sorry, not doing this right now. But as far as was I actively taking steps towards like intentional pursuit in my dating life? No, I wasn't. And the summer before we met, I remember there was just such a shift that happened, this holy shift that happened in my spirit, where I loved my single life. I did. And I had loved it for a while. Like, I was not dating out of desperation and like, get me out of this prison that I feel in of singleness. Like, I loved my single life. And so that had already happened. But the shift that happened last summer for me was, and if it never happens, what legacy do I want to leave? And this is going to sound like negative, but my mindset went from if I get married, or my mindset went from when I get married to if I get married. And not in like a I give up hope way, because I think a lot of times when we get to that point, a lot of times it does come into like a, hey, I'm just like giving up. Like, I'm not doing this anymore. I'm sick of it. I'm over it. I'm tired. But my posture really was in a place of, if it doesn't happen, is God still good? And if it doesn't happen, what do I want to show for my life? I was created for purpose. I was created to make an impact on the world. I was created for a reason at this moment and this time in history. And my life is not wasted space. My life is not wasted air if I don't get married. And so what am I going to do? Not just I love my single life, but to optimize this life the best that I can. And so I started making intentional decisions about the legacy that I want to leave. I started making intentional decisions about where I wanted to live, where I wanted to move to. I made big moves in decisions about my career and all these different things. I was in this place of, God, I'm good. I'm good being like the best aunt in the world to my nephews and bonus nephews and nieces. Like, I'm good with making an impact and pouring into future singles who create wonderful marriages, who create wonderful families. Like, if that's where you have me, if you have me in this moment of history and time, I'm okay with that. And it wasn't this place of, I give up hope, I'm never dating again. And also was a step beyond, I just love my single life. It was this place of, I want to live this full life. I want to live free in this full life. And I want to soak everything up that God has for me, not just in this season, because I think we talk about that a lot, the singleness, like soak everything up in your singleness. Like that's a very very common phrase. But it wasn't just soak everything up in my singleness. It was soak everything up in my life. And when I looked forward of my legacy, I just feel like I allowed myself to dream for the first time, which is really scary because as a kid and as a college student, as a teenager, when you dream, I dreamed about marriage and kids and all of that with a partner. And I was shifting now into this place. So the dream didn't happen.
Yeah.
It wasn't happening. And so now I found myself last summer in this place of actually allowing myself to dream about what I wanted for my future in the life that I did have, in what I did know, and who God created me to be, and dream this way.
Yeah.
And knowing that dreaming this way was not, I believed this before we met, that dreaming this way between me and God was not going to delay or hinder the potential for a dream, like with marriage and future and all of that stuff. And so I had to believe it. I had to believe that dreaming about what God had for me in this full single life was not going to delay or change the path or mess it up, or girl, you love singleness and you optimize singleness so much, like we're just going to put him on pause. Like I had to believe in the goodness of God, the sovereignty of God's timing, and knowing that he doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't make mistakes. And I didn't make a mistake. Like, I mean, I do make mistakes, but I didn't choose the wrong path. I didn't choose the wrong path, and I'm being punished by singleness.
Yeah.
And when we feel like we're being punished by singleness, it's really hard to dream in singleness.
Yeah.
Because it feels like we're in, we've been banished.
Yeah.
We've been banished to the wastelands. And so that's the season I found myself in, of just being like, yeah, we're cruising, we're good, we're not dating, we're like having big dreams and all this kind of stuff. And then I got surprised.
Yeah. Well, I think some key things to highlight in that, I mean, there's a lot of wealth there of good knowledge and good mentality and things like that you've just named and brought to fruition for listeners and watchers. But I think one thing that really stuck out, you're talking about how you were good with being single and how you reached the point of, I can do this, I'm fine, it'll be fine.
Sure.
But it wasn't out of a place of bitterness. I think that's something to highlight. It wasn't like, you know what, fine. If I'm not going to be able to find somebody, then I don't care to find somebody, and I'll be fine by myself. You know what, woman power or man power for my part.
Sure.
Like, no, I can do it. Like, no, it was, you know what, Lord, if I'm going to be single, I'm going to love people, and I'm going to do the best I can for my nephews and for my bonus nieces and nephews. But Lord, that's the goal. It's all out of love. It's not out of bitterness.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to highlight. It's not the point of, I'm doing this because I'm doing it because of my situation.
Sure.
It's, I'm doing this because I want to better.
Yeah.
Or I want to enhance. That's your life. That's the life of those around you. And I think that's huge. And then the second part to highlight is, and bitterness plays in this, if you reach that point of, fine, if I'm not going to do it, then I'm not going to do it. You're then closing yourself off.
Yeah.
You're then shutting the door, close the window, whatever analogy you want to use, boom, closed. You're not even open if a great person walks into your life and says, hey, I'm so-and-so, I just wanted to meet and talk. Oh, no, well, I'm not dating.
Yeah, your filter is like, it's not, like, I'm single, I'm professionally single,
Sorry,
I'm not dating, it's not happening.
By the way, all guys suck, and so I'm not doing this. Or all girls have broken my heart, so no, screw you. Like, no, it's a healthy perspective to say, Lord, I'm focused on you. I'm focused on my relationships. If something happens, cool.
Sure.
I'm open to it. Am I hoping for it? No. Would it be nice? Yes.
Yeah.
But you know what? If you bring someone, Lord, I'll be open to it.
Yeah.
But you're not hoping for something to happen, for one. but also on the complete opposite end, you're not just shutting it off before it ever has a chance. And I think that's important to say. Like, you have to find some sort of middle ground that's healthy for you. And there are some seasons for some individuals where you do need to say, no. Yeah. I'm not doing it right now.
For sure.
And there needs to be some seasons where you're
like
saying,
you're angry at the world.
Yeah.
You're angry
like,
at every man.
Yep. And then just like you said, you've done both pendulum swings. You've done, nope, I don't need to do it anymore because this sucks. And then you've also done, let's go and just do it. Yeah. And let's date.
Yeah.
And then you find a happy middle ground. And I think that's important. Yeah. Like, it's okay to do all of the above.
Sure. I have no regrets.
Exactly. You did do it in a healthier way. Some things may not have been healthy in the moment.
Sure.
But, you know, you when you're going on however many dates you went on, whether it's 100 or whatever, I don't know. You've never expressed it. But you went on a lot of first dates.
50 first dates. 50 plus first dates.
So if you're going on all these first dates, you did it in a healthy way. You shared your location with a close personal friend.
Yeah.
Just in those moments.
Yeah.
It wasn't about bringing all these boundaries down.
Sure.
But it was about saying, hey, I feel like I want to do this. I need someone I can trust as a young lady to know where I'm at during this moment.
Yeah.
So that's healthy.
Yeah.
It's recognizing, like, I'm not just going to go to a warehouse place and just meet somebody. Yeah, no, you got to do these things with health and with wisdom. Wisdom is important. And I assume you talk to people you trusted. Hey, can I have your advice? I'm thinking about doing this, or I'm doing, your counselors or your coaches or whatever. So I think those things are highlightable and need to be highlighted in your story because it's important.
Thanks. I appreciate it. One thing I talk to clients a lot about is the fact that, a lot of people, when people talk about love stories, they talk about the moment that you met, right? Like, oh, how did you meet? Well, let me talk about this, right? And I have felt, and I feel like I felt this way before we met, but it's just really been confirmed. But I feel like my story with you, which is why I love that we started kind of this series of like our story this way. I feel like my story with you, I can't talk about meeting you and the place I'm at without talking about the last 3 years of transformation in my own life.
Yeah.
And one thing I talk to clients about is the journey doesn't start the day that you meet him. My clients are mostly girls. The journey doesn't start the day that you meet him. The journey, the story that you're on, you're already on that journey. I didn't know it, but I was on the journey. I was in the story on my way to meet you. And what I feel like we get so caught up in culture is we are wanting the story. We're wanting the love story. We're wanting, like, when is it going to start? When is it my turn? When is it going to start? And the shift for me and what I talk about clients is like, us as like human beings, like our ultimate love story is the love story of what God is doing in our lives, like, and what God is doing and the path that he has us on and how we are learning and how we are growing. And so rather than making my marriage story the center of like the most important story of my life, like this, like idol, right, in my life, how can I look at my life and look at my story and going, the ultimate story that I'm actually on is this love story with the Lord and what he is pulling me through, how he is growing me, how he is shaping me, how he is molding me. And even the chapters of, okay, this is about like communication and relationships and like all these kind of things. Even those chapters, like Jesus and I have been on that story long before you and I met. And so it just is like, if you think about like a chapter book, like if you think about like a storybook, like the story starts, you didn't enter the picture until chapter 4, 7, 10, 25. Like you didn't enter in, like the story's been going on. And so that perspective shift of like, we're in the story, like nothing is wasted, like the highs and lows, like what you're experiencing, like what you're learning, communication, like processing through how to encourage yourself in the Lord, learning about dreams and purpose, dating, like nothing is wasted. I talk to my clients all the time about nothing is wasted. Like the things that you're learning, deep friendship, like is a part of that story. Like there's so many chapters a part of your story. And rather than your person being a character that gets introduced in chapter 1.
Mm.
He's just getting introduced at a later chapter. It doesn't make the beginning part of the story any less valid. It just means, oh, he's a character that entered into the scene in a later chapter. And so if we can shift to thinking about what is the story that God is writing here overall in our lives, the story from the day that we were born to the day we get to be in heaven with him one day, if we look at that story and that is the goal and that is the pinnacle, I want my marriage and relationships to enhance that story that I'm in, not be this focal point. And I feel like that perspective shift, being able to dream big, being able to dream is not putting my marriage to the side. It's just saying, hey, like, that chapter is coming. Like the setup for the setup for the story happens before we meet.
Mm.
The setup for the story happens before we meet. It's like, literally, we have a whole podcast episode and we haven't met yet.
Mm.
Like, you know, in this story, like, we haven't met yet. And so I feel like that is just so crucial to highlight. There is just the fact that your story is about our adventure with Christ. And if we get to experience marriage, that's the crossroads of two stories with Christ kind of crossing paths there and going with it. It's not, oh, chapter 1.
Yeah.
I met you this day, you know, type thing.
For sure. I agree with you. I think it's wonderful. And I know we've got several more segments of this series that we can do. Yeah, series, episodes.
All that stuff.
You know, as we are now 46 minutes into this one.
Yeah, for real.
But I think it's a good place to be able to say, so the prequel, if you will, sure. of Courtney and Nick, mm-hmm. We both went through some hard, difficult, just hellish times.
Yeah.
We both went through some really good joys mm-hmm. of singleness, and now I'm going to say joys of loneliness, which is a complete opposite of what I was talking about earlier.
Sure.
But we found joy in our solitude, mm-hmm. And we found purpose.
Yeah.
You know, and then we also found, you know, everything you described as far as reaching that place with God of, yes, I'm going to focus on you and I'm going to focus on myself and I'm going to move forward in my life. I was the same way. Mm-hmm. Not the exact type of same way, but I was the exact same feeling of, let me focus on myself and the Lord.
Sure.
And knowing, like, I'm in the will of God by where I'm at in life, and I'm in the will of God by, and it's just a discernment thing. It was just my feeling with the Lord. It wasn't the Lord saying, good job. Like, no, it wasn't that. And so I don't know. I think that's a good starting point for what we're talking about with this whole thing about us, Nick and Courtney, and I think it's wonderful that we're able to share.
Sure.
Honestly, a little bit of vulnerability. Well, probably a lot of bit of vulnerability. And there's much more we could share.
Yeah.
But just being able to tell a snippet of, you know, essentially 6 months or so before you and a year before me, mm-hmm. and things like that. And I just, you know, we don't even know the end of our story yet.
I know.
We're still on it.
We're in it.
Which
I'm all about taking people on the journey while we're in it.
Exactly. So, you know.
Just being me.
Yeah. Let's just jump in. We're going to jump on this boat and we're going to sail the seas of life. And, I don't know. I think it's great that we can see so much similarity mm-hmm. while also acknowledging the differences.
Absolutely.
And being able to say, no, there's hope even in singleness.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there's also joy in the journey to coupledom.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's not the end goal, but it can be a goal, or it can be a hope, or it can be a dream. That's okay. So,
yeah, I think that's such a good point. Such a good point. Well, we obviously have lots to share about, and I said this earlier, but I don't want this just to be, and our intention was never for this to be like a, let's tell you our story, like just the details and the biography and the 411. And I don't want this to be like a, hey, this is our show, but really kind of like what you just experienced, like just telling our story, but like also sharing like the truths and like what God has brought us through and what he has taught us along the way. And so I want to do that with each kind of section, each kind of series. And so what I would love from you guys, if you are not watching this on YouTube, go pull it up on YouTube, and would you drop in the comment section questions, thoughts, takeaways that you have. We want to be able to answer these questions on future episodes. Depending on the questions we get, we might do a whole question and answer episode. Like, so if you would drop your questions here in the comment section on YouTube, that would be awesome. And we want to get to those and address those. What questions like you have about this episode, what questions you want to hear in future episodes, like we can address those. So if you will just drop those in the comment section here on YouTube, we'd love to talk about those. And
fun questions, deep questions.
Oh yeah.
All the questions.
All of them.
We might say, sorry, that's a little too personal.
True.
We might.
Yeah. I got no boundaries are good. Yeah. So that's just really my hope, is that as we tell the story, a lot of you guys have been asking a bunch of different questions about it. And so I wanted to, as we're talking, Grace for the Growth is all about feeling a little less alone and a little more seen. And so, I have been, and I've shared this with you, but I have been very much in my head about sharing this. Of course, I love sharing what I'm learning and what God is doing in my life with the world. And so I get really super in my head about like, oh, I don't need to get on and like share about this, whatever. But people keep asking, and God just really very clearly reminded me that it's a story that he's given us. It's a journey that he's given us. And if he's given us a space to share it, and even if it makes a difference for one person and makes them feel a little less alone, then we're going to keep doing it. So we'll see how this goes. This is a fun little adventure for us, but we live in the same city, so we get to record a little more frequently now. But next time we jump on, we'll see what questions you have, but then I guess we should meet.
How did they meet?
I guess we should meet and dive into that. But I just want to say thanks for doing this. Yeah. That's great. It's always great to chat with you and hear stuff. I heard some stuff I hadn't heard before today, so
all right.
That was great.
Well, thank you for allowing me to accompany you on this recollection of our journeys.
Yes. Yeah. You're always, I picked you for life, so there you go.
So if you hate me, I'm here. It's to the viewers, not to her. She knows it already. So all the viewers.
Oh my gosh. But anyways, we love you guys, and I hope that this made you feel a little less alone, a little more seen. And we'll see you next episode for how did they meet, and what was dating like, and long distance, and maybe tell a couple stories about some dates. Maybe. We're definitely going to. See you guys next time. Bye. Thanks for listening to the Grace for the Growth podcast with Courtney Leo. I hope that this conversation encouraged you and inspired you on your own growth journey, and as you pursue a life full of authenticity and freedom. I want to encourage you to interact with us on social media at Grace for the Growth and at Courtney Y. Leo. Also, if you've got any ideas, way that these episodes have impacted you or encouraged you, I want to invite you to either DM us or email us at hello@graceforthegrowth.com. Until next time, I challenge you to embrace your story, welcome the messy, sit in the unknown, and live authentically. Bye-bye now.